Hello, so now we're on to video 3. Now it's time to actually make the segue, which is what I said we were going to do in the first one. So we have everything set up on the storyboard and in the view controllers. Now it's kind of combining everything. All the pieces are there, basically. Now it's making these connections. So to kind of start controlling what happens during the segue, we go to the data entry view, which is the page we start on. And we have to add a new function. So this function is called prepare for segue. It's just one of those built-in things. It's kind of just something you have to remember or look up every time. And so the function is called prepare, and it has this thing for segue. So this function gets run every time a segue on that view gets run. And every time that happens, this piece of data gets thrown into this function, what the segue is. So we created a segue, so now we know we have to reference that specific one if we want to manipulate that specific one. So let's go back here. This arrow is the segue, and it doesn't have an identifier. I've kind of made some changes in between videos, so I can't remember if I already did this, but we'll name this submit user name. And this is just text. It's not a variable name, so keep that in mind. Submit username. So I copied it so I don't misspell it. Now let's go back to this one and here. So now we could say we want to only reference that specific segue. What if the page had 5 different segues and they each do different things? For that reason, we could specify it. So we say if segue, which is referring to this now, if segue, and then it's an object that contains variables. So identifier is the name of it, equals that, which is the name of it, then we're going to do this specific thing. So what do we want to do? Really what segues do is it's a chance for the two view controllers to kind of meet up and pass data. And so the way we have to do is that we have to say, okay, what is the view controller that we're going to be talking to during the segue? And we know that this segue is the pass off between the data entry view controller and the display view controller. So we have to find a way of referencing the display view controller in this view controller. So it's I think it's kind of cool. It's this sort of the view controllers referencing each other. So another variable in the segue object is destination. So we're going to use that. So we'll say we're going to use iflet. What iflet does is it's saying if this variable can be created, then we're going to do these lines of code using that variable. So what we're going to say is I'm kind of doing this backwards, but we're saying iflet. So if this variable that I just made up can be created using segue destination, and then we're going to say as display view controller. Okay, so again, there's a lot going on here. So if this variable that I just made up can be created by saying segue, so the destination of the segue is going to be interpreted as this specific type of view controller, the display view controller. If that's possible, then we're going to run these lines of code. I off the top of my head, I'm kind of new at this stuff. I don't really know what cases would prevent this from happening. I think basically in any case, you would be able to, this line of code would run. But to me, this is just kind of the way that stops Xcode from telling you it's an error. We'll see what this says. Value was never used. We're going to use it in a little bit. So now this is referring to the display view controller. And the reason, actually, I might have written this in between things, so let's ignore that. And let's ignore that. So on this one, we need to be able to have a variable that will hold the username that we submit. And so to do that, we could just say var username, and we'll name it a string optional. The question mark means it's optional. And the reason I'm naming it that is because if this is empty, then there won't be a string inside of it. I think that is necessary, but and that's why I'm doing it. It might not be. Okay, so in display view controller, we have this variable username that is gonna store, again, the value that's in here. So here, this is the magic of Segues. So now we could say destination view controller, which is the display view controller. And now if we say dot, we can see the variables that we just made up in here, and we can reference them in this view controller. Isn't that awesome? So we could say dot username, that's the one that we want to hold the name. And what's that going to be equal to? It's going to be equal to the username text field dot text. And so that's saying that, okay, when this segue happens, whatever text is in here, boom, boom, dot text, is going to get passed into this function. And then we're going to be able to put it into that label that we created. So I think that everything's done here. Let's hope that everything on this page is good. So now we can go over here. So now we're saying, okay, the segue happens, the screen moves over. Now what do we want to display? So now we could use this view did load function. This happens every time the view loads. And so hopefully when this view loads, there's this value in username that's what the user submitted. So now what do we want to put in the username label? Instead of just having that default text, we could say username label dot text equals username. And again, well, I think I explained myself well enough. So that's saved now. I'm usually wordy in these things, so whatever. Okay, so now that's all good. So let's just give it a try. Let's see if it does what we want it to do. So let's run this. See what happens. We're running it on a 7th generation iPod Touch. Let's see how it looks. Okay, so here's our thing. Let's enter a name. Okay, my name is Joe, so I'll just put in Joe. And now we'll say submit. And it says Joe. So it's doing what we want it to do. So it's taking value from one view controller, and through the segue, it's doing this handoff to the other one. So that's awesome. And look, because it's in a navigation controller, there's a back button. So we can go back. And what if we want to change it? Now we want to name it Mario. Submit. Now it says Mario. That's awesome. So that's how segues work. There's a million other things we could do with them, but this is a pretty simple use of them. Thanks for watching.